This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Landon Andrew Laverty, West Yarmouth, Massachusetts.
Where were you born?
Frisco, Colorado.
Where did you grow up?
Split between New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
When did you move around to those places?
We moved to New Hampshire in the mid-80s, 85 I think, and down to the Cape in, I think, 93.
What was your favorite childhood memory?
I think racing sailboats.
What were your parents' jobs?
My father was in construction and my mother was a waitress.
Where did you graduate high school?
Dennis, Yarmouth.
Did you go to college?
I did some community college.
For what?
I majored in information technology and graphic design.
Did you graduate?
No.
When did you first think about joining the military?
It was one of those things that I just grew up wanting to do.
What were your family's reactions to this?
My mother was very much against it.
How old were you?
I was 18.
What was the process into getting into the military?
My process, I volunteered. I went through what's called delayed entry because I was still in high school. I chose my job and chose my job and when I was going to go to basic training, and then I left.
What was your job?
I was an infantryman.
What's an infantryman?
It's the stereotypical Army job. You go, you fight people.
Did you see combat then?
I did, in Iraq and barely in Afghanistan.
You went abroad?
Yes,
Where did you go?
Iraq and Afghanistan.
How long were you abroad?
Iraq was all of 2005 and Afghanistan was pretty much all of 2010.
Did you have any other family members that were in the Army?
None in the Army that I can think of offhand. My extended family, Navy, Marines, Air Force, etc.
Did you choose to go abroad or were you told to?
I did not. I was in a group of people who was stop-lost in 2004.
What does stop-lost mean?
Stop-loss is a process where the Army doesn't allow anyone to leave. So if you have a contract for 4 years, 3 years, however many years, the Army says, no, you are going to be here until we're done with you.
How long was that?
I was under stop-loss for, I think, 1.5 years.
Did you have to go through training to get to this point?
You train constantly. That's what you do. That's all you do.
Do you remember what it was first like to be at your camp?
I think are you meaning basic training?
Yes.
Basic training is, looking back at it, it's fun, but while you're there, it's anything but fun. You have no control over your life in any way, shape, or form. You don't get to think about when you eat, when you sleep, when you do anything. So, but looking back at it, all of the things you get to do are enjoyable, just in a less stressful environment.
What were some of those things?
Being in the infantry, you train mainly with weapons. We trained with small arms, with light crew-served weapons, heavy crew-served weapons, anti-tank weapons, mines, some guided missiles. I think we trained barely on the TOW, and there was also I think the Javelin was just being fielded when we were training, so we had a little bit of that.
Did you have any friends that you met at your camp?
In basic, I mean, you meet a lot of people, but you lose track of them unless you really stick with them. If you stay in the Army long enough, you will run into them again. So, nobody really lasting though, unfortunately.
What was a memory in either Afghanistan or Iraq that really stuck out to you either as inspirational or effective?
I'm not sure what you mean, but the one real memory that changed the way I look at things was really the most afraid I've ever been. And that was one of our first missions. We were driving through what was becoming our area of operations, and we didn't know the area. We hadn't seen it. We'd only been in country for a few days, and it was a night mission. And we pull into a town, and we see a guy. Somebody sees a guy running into an alley, and we jump out and give chase because that's what we do. It's our job. So we're chasing this guy through these alleys in the dark in a city we don't know. And all of a sudden I realized that I'm not the fastest, I'm not the slowest. So somewhere I lost everyone. I lost the people ahead of me and I lost the people behind me. And I realized I'm alone in a city in Iraq where I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I'm at, don't know where anybody is. I couldn't get home, or I couldn't get back to my patrol if I wanted to. And it's just one of those just sobering moments of just sheer terror, I guess. And a few seconds later, my patrol shot a star shell, and it just gives you a direction, and I'm able to find my way back.
How did you cope with finding your way around at first?
We didn't. I didn't worry about where I was going, and I didn't worry about where I was coming. We had maps, but really, I was a line soldier. We know how to navigate ourselves, but for the most part, we don't. It doesn't really matter what we think. We go where we're told to go.
What were some daily activities that you did at camp in Afghanistan or Iraq?
In Iraq, we patrolled. That's all we did. We woke up at a revolving time because we never got into a schedule. We didn't want to give anyone a schedule. And we would go on mission for between usually 8 and 16 hours, and then we'd come home and sleep.
When you said you didn't want to give a schedule, why was that?
The Iraqis would plant bombs in the roads, and if they had an idea of when you were going to be coming out of the gate, they would have an idea of when you were going to be passing by, so they would post their bomb detonators on the road at that time. And we never wanted to give anybody any extra chances. So we did everything in our power to make it more difficult.
What was the best memory for you up there?
The best memory in Iraq?
Yes. Yeah, there were no good memories. I mean, our favorite things were just meals, because we didn't live in a base where there was good food, so we would actually go on extra missions to go to other bases for meals, and that was about it. What were meals like?
Mostly, we would eat food cooked by a guy in our local Iraqi police station, a guy named Ali, who we had an arrangement with. We would get him whatever he wanted, and he would cook us food. It was generally eggs and potatoes fried with hot dogs and whatever you wanted, and that's what we ate for the most part because it was in our area of operations, and our chow hall was terrible, and we didn't have any other options. That was the most regular. We would go to, most of the time we went to chow halls, but we went to as many different ones as we could.
What were sleeping accommodations like?
In Iraq, we actually did pretty well. We started out in 100-man tents, and that only lasted about a month till somebody made a deal with some contractors who were leaving, and we took over a small compound in our forward operating base. And we had a bunch of single-wide trailers that were cut in half. They were supposed to be 2-man rooms, but we stuck 4 or 5 people in them most of the time. And one double wide trailer that we had. I think we had 8 or 10 guys in it.
Did you keep any personal diaries that you had?
That lasted about a week. I tried, and then you just realize that you don't want to really think about it anymore. It was one of the first missions. We were driving through a town, and there'd just been a car bomb in front of an Iraqi police station, and there's chunks of people on the road. And that was the end of it.
Were you able to contact people at home?
We did. MWR operated a small tent in our fob. There were 7 telephones and a few computers, and if you had the time to wait in line for several hours, you could use one of the telephones for an exorbitant rate.
When you weren't on a mission, what were you doing?
Sleeping, playing Xbox. That was about it.
Were there things for you to do like Xbox?
It was just what you had created for yourself. Our fob was very small. They actually quit mortaring us because they couldn't hit the base, so they just quit trying. And there was really almost nothing besides what we would make for ourselves.
What was it like, just feeling wise, to be there? Were you like?
The general feeling is just anger. For the most part, we were a group of people who had joined the Army before the Iraq War started, so we had no interest in being there. Most of us had joined up after 9/11, so we all had the back of our mind, we might go to Afghanistan, we might end up at war, but when we first started, Iraq wasn't on the table. And you get there, and you're just like, I don't want to be here, I don't want any part of this. And then somebody like me who's stop lost, I'm so over it, you have no idea. And then you realize people are trying to kill you, and that just makes you more angry.
Did you ever see Afghan life while you were there?
Not Afghanistan. Iraq, we did. I patrolled constantly, so we interacted with the locals on a fairly regular basis. At least I did. I wasn't a dismounted crew member from my truck, so I didn't go all the time. But I did enough that, we'd share tea with the locals. Sometimes we would commandeer houses for OPs, observation points, and sometimes they were really nice to us, and they'd bring you food and they'd bring you water, and other times they were indifferent, and other times they wouldn't be hostile, but they wouldn't like that you were there, and you could tell.
Did you make any Afghan friends?
No, there's not enough of a language, not enough capability to communicate. We could communicate with our interpreters, but their names were withheld. We never knew their actual names because of reprisals within the locals.
Did you ever think about learning the language while you were there?
Besides profanity? No.
What things that you did there, activities, made you, or maybe didn't, change your lifestyle at home?
Lifestyle-wise, nothing. Not much of anything. You definitely get a very deep relationship with adrenaline, and it takes a while to get over. But other than that, nothing.
Were you awarded any medals?
Not every, but lots of awards are called medals. Generally for the infantry, we don't really regard them as important unless they're bronze stars, silver stars, things that are really important. I mean, you get Army Achievement medals, Army Commendation medals, Good Conduct medals, but those are just dressing. Like, nobody really cares about them. And so no, I got the usual ones. I didn't get any important things.
Were there meaning behind Bronze Stars and Gold?
The Bronze Star was unfortunately getting kind of watered down because a bunch of people started getting it as a kind of good job pat on the back, because if you had enough rank, they would give it to you. Anybody who got a Bronze Star as a lower enlisted man earned it. But other than that, the ARCOM with V was not, I don't want to say pretty good, but it was respected to see. MSMs, which is a meritorious service medal, and Silver Stars were about all you would ever see.
Did you have any instructors or captains that really stuck out to you?
Overall, in Afghanistan, we had Staff Sergeant Cooper. He was my squad leader, and he went to bat for us on most things. And then prior to that, my platoon sergeant was solid and would always go to bat for the guys. But as a lower enlisted man, you don't really deal with anybody higher. You're generally dealing with your NCOs. The officers all deal with each other, and we're kind of set off by ourselves.
Was there a rank that you were given within the infantrymen?
The Army overall, the ranking system is all-encompassing around the Army, and you work your way up no matter what you do. I started off as an E1 private, which is the absolute barest bottom of the bottom, and I never really went too far because I didn't worry too much about promotions, and especially in Iraq, I was so pissed off. They offered me a chance to go to the board for E5, which is sergeant, and I told them in pretty much less profane words to go to, or more profanity, to go to hell.
Did you ever drive anything there? Like, were you in charge of driving?
Yes, I drove Humvees. I drove something called a HEMTT, which is a heavy expanded mobility truck transport. I rode on tanks from time to time, and in training I technically had an Army license to drive almost everything. I drove 113A3s for a little while prior to Iraq, and then I've driven pretty much all the truck-sized vehicles.
What was the culture like there?
Whose culture? Our culture or their culture?
Both.
Their culture, they were very, for the most part, polite. And we made a point to be polite back whenever possible. We did no-knock raids, and we did cordons, and we did all kinds of terrible things. If you think about it, like going to a neighborhood and basically locking everybody in and searching every single person and house in the area, it's not a nice thing to do at 2 o'clock in the morning, but we did it. Later, we got a lot more polite as we took less contact. We would just walk around neighborhoods and say hello and try to be polite, and mainly make the case of, we don't really want to be here. We want you guys to govern yourselves and do your own thing. Then we can leave and never come back. And that's what we tried to portray. And then our culture was terrible. Profanity. And we didn't drink. There were a couple of instances of people getting bootlegged, but for the most part we didn't drink. It was mostly just profanity and anger and video games and lots of violence.
You said you were enlisted after 9/11. Was there tension that you could feel there? Because of that?
I'm not sure what you mean. There was a heightened sense of we have a mission, and some of you will go to war, and that was the way we trained. We still had, and it's kind of funny, the Army changes slowly, and we, in 2002, when I went to basic, still had little pop-up targets that were shaped like Russian soldiers, and they were called Crazy Ivan. And even though we all knew that we weren't fighting the Russians ever again, well, yet, we still knew him as Crazy Ivan, and we shot Crazy Ivan, and it didn't really make any sense. But you realize pretty quickly that whole thing doesn't make sense. None of it really makes sense.
Could you feel a difference from Afghanistan and Iraq?
There was a huge difference between Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is a difference that actually led me to get out of the Army. When I joined up in 2002, and I was on active duty from then until 2006, the NCO Corps, the non-commissioned officers, were really professionals, and their job is to train and take care of the lower enlisted. And that's all their job is. They do some leadership for a short time, as far as a career goes. It's not even the majority of a long career. But they're very professional. They take care of soldiers for the most part, and they do it with pride. And when I went, the next time I was on active duty, which was for Afghanistan, I discovered that the NCOs had lost a lot of that professionalism. And I chalk it down to most of my generation, my cohort of lower enlisted in 2005, when we were getting our promotions to E5. A lot of us got out because we were stop loss, because they send us to Iraq for 15, 16 month tours. Most of us were over it. Even guys I know who wanted to stay had no interest in doing it anymore. And after that, I think the quality of soldiers went down a lot. And then when I got back in 2010, a lot of those the less qualified soldiers had been promoted because they didn't have any other options. They were the best of a bad crop, and they didn't take care of their soldiers as well. They covered their own asses rather than their soldiers. And I didn't like how it was going.
Did you choose to switch places to tour?
No, you get orders. I actually asked for orders to wherever. In 2008, because of the recession, I was in the reserve, and I asked my commander, any orders I can get, I'll take. And my orders came out in 2009, and I took them.
Did you create strong bonds with the men you were with there, or when?
You create strong bonds with the people you're there with, and for the most part, like, even though I've fallen out of touch with them, I'm like, if one of them called me up tomorrow, I'd go help them, because I know that they would probably do the same thing for me. If I called up one of them, they'd find me. And I've taken care of soldiers too. I had troops under me, and if they call me, I'll go take care of them.
What was it like coming back to America?
Awkward. For the most part, you don't tell people what you did, because when you first get back, it's just a rush of all these just insane things, and everybody's, oh, thank you for your service, oh, was it terrible, and all this and that, and you can't bring the two worlds together, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And while you hear a lot of, it's nice to hear the thank you for your service, and there's an airport in Bangor where a large majority of the return trips stop for a layover, and there's a group of people, at least up until 2010, who they'd be there to meet most of the flights and say welcome home, which is, it's great. And from somebody who's studied some history and knows what happened to the guys who came back from Vietnam, you're thankful for that part of it. And then there's the realization of most people never get to talk to somebody who actually saw any real, you don't want to say action, but any real interaction with the locals overseas. For the most part, most guys are cooks and mechanics and techs and logistics and clerks. And I did it in Afghanistan. You never go outside. I went on one mission in Afghanistan, and I had no problem with that. But it's odd, it's awkward, every bit of it.
How long did it take you to adjust to that awkwardness?
I got over it. I just got over it. I don't know how long it took or really what happened. It still feels kind of awkward sometimes.
Did you get any injuries while you were there?
The Purple Heart is kind of an odd duck. It's an award everybody kind of wants. At least in the infantry, everybody's talking about it, but you don't want. And the biggest problem is, and it's not really a problem, it's the strange aspect of it, is that you get the same award if you lose a limb or two versus you get a cut on your hand. It's the same award. And you hear, I had minor injuries here and there. I blew out an eardrum, stupid little things. But I knew a guy who broke three limbs at once. I knew a guy who was eviscerated. What do I care?
Would you be willing to show us your uniform?
Yeah, I can do that. This is the old Class A, which they don't even use anymore, apparently. This wasn't updated as far as my getting out of the Army. I switched from the infantry into a technician support job when I went to the reserve in 2007. So that's why that's there. That's the Ordnance Corps. That's the Ordnance Corps. That's my regimental crest from, I can't remember what regiment it was. Over here, that's shooting, marksmanship. That's expert rifle. I got a driver mechanic badge from Iraq. And then the only one that the infantry ever really cares about is the combat infantryman's badge. It was the only thing that we ever cared about getting. Along with the infantry, you get your blue cord. It kind of makes you feel special, and then you meet a bunch of people with a bunch of other special cords. Service stripes, one for every 3 years. Again, I haven't updated it. Combat hash marks, one for every 6 months. And then my rank, I was a specialist, E4. And then my combat patch with the 11th Armored Cavalry.
How did you get the infantry badge?
The combat infantryman's badge is awarded to any combat or any infantryman who sees combat and basically deals with it properly. if you somehow just lock up under your first combat and end up out of the Army, you're probably not going to get it. But for the most part, it was the last, or my award, I think, was the last automatic award of the Combat Infantryman's Badge. They put us in as a block as soon as the company had pretty much seen combat, and they put us, all of the infantrymen, in as a block, and we all got it at the same time.
As a specialist, did you have any other duties that other people wouldn't have?
The specialist is kind of an odd rank in the Army. It's actually, the pay grade is E4, and it's the only rank that really has two completely separate positions. There's an E4 specialist and an E4 corporal. The corporal's an NCO. He gets to tell people what to do. The specialist isn't an NCO and technically doesn't tell people what to do. However, you're telling people what to do is as much a function of your rank as it is your actual position and your title. So, as a specialist, I didn't really have any special anything. But when I was in Afghanistan, and even when I was in the reserve, I was a section leader and a section sergeant and a subject matter expert in my field. So I was pretty much, the master of my own little fiefdom, which was very, very nice.
Looking back, were you grateful that you had served in the Army?
I don't know about grateful. I mean, it might have been a weird, odd choice of words. I would say I enjoyed. Enjoy is even a bad word. It's hard to really put it into words. Would I not have done it? No. I'm glad that I did it. It wasn't a bad thing in my life. There were bad experiences, but overall, it taught me some things about myself. And while it may not have made me a better person, it made me a slightly different person.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.